So we talk about recurrent neural networks, STM, and so on. So we ended with like have some. Let me just go to where we ended. Yeah, we look into like couple example like using LSTM and RNN to generate tests. So basically that's one very simple version. Like this is, you can find this online written by Kapafy. It's like only 125 lines of code using simple RNN to do that. And he had some example like generating a pretty decent test here. And we also like talk about another work, that's earlier work that by Hinton, that is a slightly different model, like a little bit more complicated model, that and trained with a larger data set as well. And we look into like some of these his generated tests, and always pretty interesting. We mentioned that like actually we ended here something like look into the test he generated by Hinton and his student back in like 2012, and as we mentioned, like this is a character-based like generation, so it's like it's especially amazing in the sense that like per character is trying to spell the next character, right? But still it is able to capture some of this syntax and also like semantic things. Like for example, like yeah, he I mean like basically like it looks like the model is able to do like balancing quotes and brackets, and also like it learns a huge number of like words, vocabulary, and kind of seems like it understands some of this beyond syntax. For example, like the model is able to typically associate, like for example, potato with Wittgenstein, and also cabbage with like vegetable, and so on. And of course, those are character models. We can go beyond and have word models, and but yeah, I won't go into that. Like this is just a work. If you're interested, you can check him out. Like it's a word using a word model instead of characters model, and just an example of like another example of application. It's like image captioning, that we have a photo here or like image here. We're trying to generate some caption there, and we can use a RNN for that. More precisely, is a combination of CNN and RNN. So the basic model is pretty simple. Of course, like there has been quite a few works on that. Like here we just talk about one that is by Feifei Li and his group, like and her group, I should say. Basically, it's very simple model. Like you start with an image like this, you go for a CNN, and it can be like simple AlexNet, let's say, and then like at the very end layer, you just like remove some of the layers there. So you just use the last layer, second last layer, to the third last layer as your input feature, and plug that into a RNN, and then you just start from there, right? So you have the input here, some start state like of the RNN. You need to start with some states. Then it spell out something, right? You spell out a character, spell out a word. In this case, it use a word model. It spell a word there, and then the word will be put into as the next day, and then you also have the input as the next day, and also you have the hidden variable is still there, right? And then you just keep continue until like when you output the sample is basically is a token like n, then you stop the sentence there. So it's a pretty simple model, but if you train it with like lots of data is just generate something like amazing. For example, like the training using Coco here, that have, of course, like it has both images and also like the description for the data sets there. Therefore, you can train for captioning. And here's some of the results using the simple model. And you see like sometimes it works perfectly. For example, like this is kind of like perfect, right? Man in black shirt is playing guitar, and there's a construction worker in orange safety vest is working on road, and there's two young girls. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of recognizes baby as girls, but I'm not sure about whether you can say it's a girls and boy. And this boy is doing backflip on wakeboard. It's not completely correct, but it's still like close, right? But there's also like cases is quite far off. For example, like this young boy is holding a baseball bat, and like a cat is sitting on a couch with remote control, and then a woman holding a teddy bear in front of a mirror. Yeah, this part is a bit off, like not sure where is the teddy bear. And then a horse is standing in the middle of yeah, the horse, not sure about that. Maybe this one, I'm not sure. So, but anyway, like it's kind of interesting starting point. Of course, like this is like date back like several years now. So I didn't kind of track this line of works closely, so I'm not sure like how far they are now. So, but if you're interested, this is kind of like interesting research area as well. So, okay, this is so much I'd like to talk about RNN, and I want to still like okay, it's still kind of related to RNN. Like it's something that but usually people will not consider as RNN, but like something related. I like to spend a little bit time on that. Is the echo state networks. It's a kind of what should I say? Again, I borrow these slides, not exactly. I rewrite that, but the slide is kind of more or less inspired, I would say, like by Hinton's course in 2012, and so the echo state network is something pretty different from like what we had earlier. It is it's actually not actually a very deep network. Typically, it's like this. It's only like two-layer networks here. But what we have is like we're trying to expand the hidden layer here. Like in the second layers, we just have like many new ones here. But we are not trying to train it. And also like this layer is actually is a kind of a recurrent network. So the output here will feed back to the original layer. So that's why like it's related to RNN, and that's why people call it echo state, because you echo back to the original network. And what's interesting, of course, like this is like you can try to train it, but typically what people did is like for this echo state networks, you just kind of like have some parameters to set. Afterward, you just have this part fixed. You just like have this states like keep echoing itself with this hidden variables that keep evolving. What you're trying to train only the hidden variable parts to the output part. So I mean in the sense if you give some input, like this part is fixed, and then you have these hidden variables keep changing, and you can't try to train this part. And of course training this part is pretty easy, right? Typically this will be used like for regression rather than classification. So many examples will be used like for signal generator, let's say. So in that case, it's just a regression model here. So it's just a matrix multiplication, right? So it's like very easy to train. It's actually, I'll show you just a quick demo later on. You can train it in seconds, not even minutes. So and this is kind of repeating what I'm saying. Something we need to be careful that is also similar to like RNN before, because your you're feeding back like your signal to the original layer here. So you're essentially multiplying a weight matrix, keep multiplying a weight matrix. And so therefore the weight matrix to have a kind of the eigenvalues close to 1. Otherwise, you will either explode if like your that matrix eigenvalue is larger than 1, or like if it's less than 1, way less than 1, it will just diminish to 0. Another thing is that like you typically you want to have like sparse connectivity when you connect back, have the connection between the hidden and hidden weights. Because as you think of this model here is if you have this thing is like very much connected, like I mean like for the hidden layer is connect. I mean this is hidden layer. It connected back like to every. It's draw pretty badly. Let's say this is the next time instant here, right? What I mean is like it should have like sparsely connected, like from this time instant to the next time instant here. If you are like completely connected here, so the chance is that like you will have this randomized effect that kind of in the sense like you averaging out the input in the next time instance. So more or less after several time instance, you will have like everything is just averaged out like to be uniform. Right? That's exactly not you want, right? This is completely opposite to what you want. What you want is actually want something like that's exactly like this echo thing. It's like you may start with input like kind of concentrate in this region, but as time goes, you think of this as like kind of a brain also, like this layer. You can kind of like think of this actually our brain. It kind of like echo back signal. You have some input like coming in, but you mostly like rely on this echoing back like back and forth. Then sometimes this portion of your brain is like activated, and some other time like after several time instance maybe the signal travel to here, you more or less like activate here, have large intensities of the signal. Sometimes they move back and forth to different areas. So so therefore sparsity is important in terms of connectivity. And you also want to be careful with the scaling of the input, like input to hidden layer. So if this is like, for example, too large, then it will just like drown the signal inside the your kind of the echo layer or the hidden layer. Or on the other hand, if it's too small, then there will be no effect to the hidden layer, right? So and of course, you have like it looks like a lot of parameters to tune, but luckily also because this is learning so fast, it doesn't matter, right? So you can just tune it very quickly. So it is kind of very different from like what we talked about earlier. Like we have all these big models, but this one is I have a tiny model, so you can train very quickly. But yeah, it's still like have some interesting applications sometimes. So this is an example trying to, as I mentioned, I have a signal generator, just like you have like signal generator in those like very expensive or what's that signal generator you give. Okay, let me just give you a picture. Like you have an input signal like that, then you will have a quiescent signal with like different frequency generated. Let's say this is like let's say start with like this frequency, and then you increase the frequency, and then you lower the frequency, and then increase the frequency again, and that will be your desired output, right? So you have a medium frequency, and then you get higher frequency, then you lower it a lot, and then you increase it again. So now you're trying to train your model to generate this, have this frequency generator. So and inside this kind of hidden layer here, like people also call it the dynamical reservoir. So as I mentioned, that you will have all this loop going back, like this echoing things like going on. So and again, you're just trying to train this part if everything goes well, then you will have more or less almost like, oh, this is like not completely go well, but still like going pretty well, I would say. Actually, maybe like I'll just show you the quick demo for this one here. This is if you look online, there's I think there's I copy from like this is Scholarpedia, something like if you go and they have this ESN package that's written by some guys here. And if you use the model, it's quite simple actually. Basically, they have this ESN things like create this echo state network. I don't remember all these parameters now, but for example, this spectral radius is controlled as the largest eigenvalue, that kind of things. Apparently, this is the number of isomorphs, just number of like hidden variables in the layer, in the hidden layer, and then like you have the number of inputs, number of outputs, and so on. This, let me just run this. As you can see, it's trained really quickly. Like this is just a couple seconds, and then this is a training kind of training example and the testing. So you have given the training example, it trained pretty well. Testing is it kind of still decent, right? So it captured the idea there, but maybe not perfect. But luckily, as you can see, like I can play around with that, like really quickly. I can test like different cases really quickly because it's so fast. And this just trying to draw the spectrogram to compare the result. So the test target and model, some of them is quite okay, like this is a little bit off in this area here, but yeah, overall is I mean like I guess this idea itself is kind of interesting also. I'm actually echo I mean it's kind of if you think of this class in machine learning, it's kind of similar to this kernel trick also, like you kind of expand your feature space like from low dimension to high dimension. This is like exactly the, I shouldn't say exactly, but very similar to that. And yeah, I guess I will just show you another example demo here. So this is again I'm training a different model here. I try to predict like what's going. Actually, if you're, of course, it won't be very accurate, but you can just use this, for example, to try to predict like Bitcoin price or so on. Right? And of course, I don't bet your money on that. But this here in this example is basically have this kind of target system. I'm not sure like what this Mackay glass system is actually like, but basically you have a signal patterns is like this one. So you observe part of this, say 2,000 samples, then you're trying to predict the next 2,000 samples here. That's what it's trying to do. So it started like the next 300 samples is doing pretty well, right? But afterward it's just a bit off and stuff like that. So therefore, as you imagine, you can also like predict other like 1D signal samples, for example, like as I said, like stock price and so on, with this echo state network. So this is more or less I like to talk about these echo state networks. Let's see, where am I? So this is just a quick summary, and I guess I mentioned, let's see, of course, like, initializing weight is very important. I keep emphasizing that. Uh, yeah, but honestly, you see, like, this result, like, for 1D, like, time series signal, it's like, it's pretty impressive, like, the result, but you can easily extend it to, like, two-dimensional and more complex model. So it's a little bit unfortunate for that. I'm actually, I guess um, uh, there's also, I would say this is really a serious bad aspect, like, because at least it's not very limiting in that sense that if you have this 1D signal, you because it's so fast anyway, you just put more hidden variables and think of like how big your models nowadays, like this Alex Lab and models like Google Lab and so on, like this is nothing. So like more hidden units is nothing. But anyway, I copied these slides from like Hinton, so uh, he's my idol, but I don't agree with everything he said anyway. So and he mentioned this most likely because their work like with Suskiva, like in I mean his student at that time in 2012, they used some of this idea of like echo state network in terms of initializing the weight and in terms of like initializing the parameters in RNN. I guess that's why he brought up echo state network at that time mostly, but yeah, but I think like in terms of 1D signal, like if you have like something just to predict 1D signal, it's still like it's a very nice model that you can start playing with that very quickly. So therefore, I like to spend a little bit time on that. And also this idea, like I think to expand your network a bit with like more parameters, but in the sense that you're not going to train those parameters. Um, I mean, expand to like not more parameters, but more variables. But you're not training the parameters to generate those variables. Um, actually, some interesting idea. Actually, my student is exploring that, um, but yeah, we don't have a very good result yet. But I guess it's some okay result. We probably will try to submit to some conference. So that's some conclusion with like what we talked about like last class and also this class, part of this class like on RNN. So and oh actually this is a very good slide just to summarize like application of RNN. So we have this kind of like one-to-one vanilla neural network, vanilla kind of neural network here. And if we expand to RNN to have like some memory here, we have like one input like and multiple outputs, right? So we already saw one example. This is like image captioning that we mentioned earlier. And we can have like many to one also. Like we have like many input, and we can also train an RNN model to spell one output there. That, for example, we can have like sentiment classification, like from a paragraph to trying to classify what's the sentiment of that paragraph, like whether the authors think that, for example, it can be like a review of some products, right? Whether the customer is happy or not happy, and we can have many to many. Maybe I will ask you, like, give me some example. Like, can you think of like many to many, many inputs and spell many outputs? Kind of model like. So one apparent example would be translation, right? You have like a sequence of words. It can be just language translation or like even non I mean what's that word? Natural language, right? Even you can have like okay, but I don't think it will work. But for example, like language translate from C to Python or stuff like that. But I doubt that will work, at least not in that sense. And and they have other models. For example, this one is actually very similar to this one, um, but you see like the difference of this one and this one is like this one you look at the entire input and then you spell out the output, right? So it more make more sense for language, for example, a translation or paragraph, right? You want to listen the whole things and then you start to like translate the things, right? Especially if you know Japanese or so on. Japanese is an interesting language in the sense that the yes and no of that sentence is at the very end. For example, like 私は like 日本人じゃないです like I'm not a Japanese. I'm not is like at the very end. If if I change that very end, then the whole sentence will be different. Right? I would say I'm a Japanese way. So therefore, like you need to listen until the very end to know like whether like you're saying like you are talking something. So you need to really get the whole input here. But for example, in this example, like if I have model like this, I'm trying to do a video classification. That is will become ongoing when you keep looking at the video, and then things keep changing. You want to spell spell at this moment like what you're seeing. So then you will have this kind of like models that won't wait until the end to spell output. So okay. Another remark. So we mentioned LSTM and also a little bit GRU, and any case like those models trying to increase your memory a little bit to able to memorize stuff like for a longer period of time, or you can think of like it just allow you to train more easily for the RNN network because they have this skipping connection, just similar to Westlet, and we need to be careful with the gradient. Actually, I'm not sure. Actually, I think I didn't really talk much about that. Maybe but anyway, like this is similar to what I mentioned, that because when you the weight, it's just like in the deep lateral, right? But in recurrent neural lateral, you actually have the weight that the same weight you are going to keep multiplying many times, and therefore like your gradient going back is also going to multiply these things like many times as well. So therefore like the weight initialization is extremely important, like to make sure that you're not going to explode or like vanish the gradient. Hinton mentioned about that, but I'm not sure, like it may not be very popular now, using like non-gradient descent method, the second order like Newton methods to do optimization to train the model, because typically you will what should I say? I guess I won't add more things. But my observation is that it doesn't look like people are using it a lot like nowadays. Except like maybe you see that like in Deep Dream and so on. In that case, your training data is like simple because you only have one training image. You're using the image as your training data, right? So in that sense, like you can afford to have this more expensive like optimization algorithm that. But for other cases, it probably is like too expensive. Maybe that's why people are not using it that much. And we also mentioned echo state network, and that's it. But it's kind of interesting for 1D signal, but it doesn't work well too much for like high dimensional input. I shouldn't even say work too well. Maybe there's work on that, but I'm not following this topic, so it doesn't seem to me like anyone is trying to say like echo state lateral for 2D two-dimensional input and so on. So I'm not sure. So anyway, I guess I'll start with a new topic here. So where am I? So we're going to talk about generative models, and in particular, we'll talk about GANs. That probably will cover quite a bit GANs today. So we just talk about RNN, and you can think of like kind of RNN as a generative model also, right? Because you see, like we can use that to generate languages and generate like tests and codes and so on. We will look into like more generative models, and this I guess I probably can skip that. Supervised and supervised learning. We mentioned that like several times, like supervised and supervised learning, and you can think of like generative model would be like kind of unsupervised learning, right? So you don't actually have a very much kind of like supervised goal to say, have a teacher to say, okay, this thing's supposed to have like this outcome. But in this case, we're just trying to have the model to learn the underlying structure. And I did talk about that before. I don't quite remember now, but I think like we probably talk about that like supervised and supervised learning like at the beginning. I think I did, so I guess I will just skip that. So you already see some generative models, right? In RNN. Now we'll just give it a more formal treatment here. So let's say we have some training data here. So we can think of this like probabilistically, right? So we have the distribution of the training data. So let's say this is the distribution of the training data. And so in that sense, what it means is like, this is just a probability here. If I have some x here, that is like, is this bird, it's like the training data here, then my p, this bird here should be big, right? So if it's not in this training data here, I substitute this x not inside the training data, is give me a small values here. So I can also have this generate a sample like from another distribution, like this p model distribution here. So what we want is we're trying to train this p model to be similar to the p data here, as what the data that we observe. So there will be like several flavors to do that. Like we can have explicit way to do that trying to really learn this model here, learn this distribution here, right? And have this p model as close as this p data somehow. And it can also like have an implicit weight, in the sense that we're not trying to find out like what's this p data distribution, but we're just trying to like somehow eventually without knowing or like learning this p data and able to generate data that is close to this p data distribution. And what's the use of generative model? It's fun, as you can see for the language one, like you can generate tests to amuse like friends and so on. I guess mostly it's fun. So I'm not sure like what it stands for. I guess this is the number one application. But there's some excuse also, like people doing that, like saying, okay, I'm more serious, like but I'm still like playing with GANs, just because let's say like we can generate some data like for of course like artworks like supervised resolution, I would say all this is fun, right? I don't know, artworks is basically for fun. Colorization, you have like sketch of this image here. I'm trying to color this. So I don't have a 5-year-old yet, but if she become 5-year-old, she'll be able to do that, right? So I'm not sure like why we want to do it, like have a machine to do it. We can like outsource that to 5 years old. So I guess it's for fun. So and we can do supervised resolution, and maybe this is more serious. But it's also like I would say it's supervised resolution in the sense is visually appealing, but I'm not sure it will give us more information. I would doubt that. Like I didn't check with the work yet. For example, if you have image that it have some maybe license plate stuff, then if you think of movies that like you have like supervision scheme, it just suddenly blows up like have. I'm not sure you have this kind of supervision. You probably kind of like make a supervision, but it doesn't still like doesn't give you informative stuff that you can identify this is license plate is like ABC 1 2 3 or something like that. So therefore, I think it's really for fun, but still, some other possible application, I guess. Okay, is that more? You can, I guess more seriously, you can generate data potentially to train your model as well. But I guess this is still a little bit ideal. Yeah, but it's hard to say. Like it's just my opinion, I would say. Wait, where am I? Actually, I'm already beyond the application phase. Okay, here I'm talking about this discriminative model versus generative models. So, by the way, discriminative models is just a fancy word for classifier. So I want to classify A versus B and so on. And of course, generative models is like what was just mentioned here, like trying to generate data. So for many older machine learning problems we've seen so far, it's like all kind of discriminative models that trying to classify a problem. And a generative model is getting so much interest in recent years because I guess it's fun, I guess mostly. And you in the sense that you can also use that to create data up to a certain extent for example, like for reinforcement learning, we didn't talk about that, but think of self-driving car. So you need to have data to train the model for self-driving car, but you don't want to use real data completely. Say, okay, I have this self-driving car model now. I'm just putting in the world to have this real data. So it's like just driving there and going to hit some people there. Like you don't want to do it exactly. So therefore, you want to create some simulated data for training the data somehow. So theoretically, if you have like generative model, it would be useful to do such kind of job. But of course, you ask like, why don't we just use Grand Theft Auto to do that, or Unreal 4, or like any game engine like from whatever. I mean, for whatever like first player game like you like first player shooter game that you love. So therefore, like, I think it's more or less an excuse to me, like still, but still, like it didn't forbid anyone to play with GANs. Like GANs is still an extremely popular research area, even though like this slide is prepared last year, And in 2007, I bought a lot like this slide from CS231N like in the year like 2000. They no longer like share the slides anymore to the public. They stopped doing that. So they only have this older class there. So the latest one is no longer available. So, but even this is 2 years back. So in 2007, 17, I'm still like GANs is still a very active research area. So okay, by the way, I'm talking about GANs here, and in general, generative model has been studied like for quite a while already. Like if you think of that, for example, Boson machine and also like autoencoder introduced in almost a decade, actually more than a decade now. And GANs was introduced, I forgot, like 2014 or 13, around that time. And I probably would spend some time on autoencoder and Boson. I don't know whether Boson machine I would go into that, but definitely will go into like autoencoder. So and besides this, we have also other models, for example, this pixel RN and pixel CNN. I'll just briefly go through that. Like, if you're interested, you can go for a paper. By the paper. The paper is this one. It's 2016. Like by Fandor. And I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Just fake. Anyway, so basically, this is an explicit model. It's trying to generate the model of the image. Let's say you have the image here now, the image with it's the input X here. So I want to create the distribution of this image here. And the distribution will model like pixel by pixel. So therefore, like for the entire image, let's say I have n pixels here, then the distribution or the probability of the entire image will be the product of the conditional probabilities, right? So given, let's say the first pixel, let's say I have like probability of like x0, and then or x1, and then given the first pixel, I have the probability of the second pixel will be the conditional probability of the second pixel given the first pixel. And then if I look in the entire image, basically I'm scanning the entire image now. So I have the first pixel starting, okay, so bad. First pixel, the probability for this guy, and then look in the second pixel, probability of this guy, condition on this guy, and then the next pixel will be like probability of this guy, condition on the earlier pixel, and so on. And then you just multiply all of them, and will give you the probability of that image. So pixel RNN is just trying to model that. So you go from your pixel, but you need to dig into the paper. But this is the rough idea. It's just model this kind of conditional probability with the RNN model, basically. And you have then another similar model. It's like pixel CNN is similar, but you use the CNN model instead. So you have you use a neighborhood of the current pixel as your input, and go for a CNN network, and then trying to spell out the probability of this pixel here. And then based on this probability, you just sample the pixel here. Right? Okay, I guess I didn't mention the sampling part. So, but it's obvious, right? So let's use this pixel CNN as example. So you start with maybe you randomize a patch first, or like you start with just burning something. It's just like in the language model that we play with in the last class there, that if we want to generate a test, then you start with like burning several characters. Like, for example, you remember that the meaning of life is, then you burn in this input, then you try to predict the next character and so on. So it's similar here. You burn in something, like, for example, in this corner, just have some information here. Now for the next character, now it's the next pixel. You use the neighborhood here to try to go through the CNN. Then it gives you the prediction of the intensity, like have a distribution of the intensity of that pixel. Then you just sample from that intensity, right? So maybe you have the the distribution is like this. Then you sample according to this distribution, right? So you're more likely to sample at this intensity and this intensity and so on. Then after sampling, then you have this next pixel. Then you have one more pixel. You can repeat the same step and continue and so on and so forth. And this is the generated data using this algorithm. So it looks like something. Of course, it's very tiny. It's cipher 10, 32 by 32. The problem with cipher 10 is that the resolution is so low that like you can't even tell whether it's the data, the input, like is real or like fake. So anyway, I won't spend much more time here because as we go into like more complicated model, as you can see, like GANs and so on, you have like more realistic output, and you can tell better like whether it's something real or for real or like just fake. So there's some follow-up work like of this pixel RN and pixel CNN. If you're interested, you can look at that, like that by Salimans. And let's go into GANs. Even though we only have 15 minutes, I guess I will just talk a little bit about GANs, maybe like continue if we do not finish everything. But let's go for high level. The idea is really simple, and it's by the group in, of course, it's by the first author is Goodfellow. I think he did that like while he was still a student in Banjo School in Montreal. It is a seminal work that actually Jan LeCun even said that one of the big fear in deep learning, right? Jan LeCun even said that like he thinks this is the greatest idea for the last 20 years. I'm not sure like he's trying to make Banjo happy or whatever, but anyway, but the idea is actually pretty simple, right? So you just like play a simple game. So if you know a little bit game theory, so you have like two players there, and now the game here is you have a generator and a discriminator, is the two players. The generator is trying to create fake images, or like fake data, or fake anything, fake speech or something, and the discriminator is trying to discriminate between fake samples and real sample. So in the sense that you're then during training, you're trying to train both of them together. Right? You're trying to improve both the discriminator and the generator. So for the discriminator, you will both input the output from the generators, some fake output like from the generator, fake samples from the generator, and at the same time you mix them with some real samples, right? And then the discriminator just need to identify correctly, okay, this is real, this is fake, this is real, this is fake, and so on. Then you try to train that. And typically in this model, we are not so interested in the discriminator, but we are more interested in the generator. And from game theory, like Nash equilibrium, right, or John Nash, what was that movie like several years ago, like I forgot, whatever, like. But Nash is partially insane, right? That's actually many scientists are partially insane. This is like, I guess when you become genius, like you are very easy to become insane also. I'm not sure, just a side story, like not exactly insane, but what's it? Autism in California. That's especially in Silicon Valley. there are very high incidence of autism kids born. Do you heard of that news? One theory is that like because there's so many high concentration of nerves there, the genes when they mix together, there's high concentration to create either genius or like autism, like kind of like pretty close together. Like another guys that I can think of like is very close to be insane is like Gödel, like Gödel in completeness film. Like I guess if you heard of that, like it's saying that like anything is if you have a mathematical model or something. I don't know the word for that. So basically, okay, I'm going out of that, but it's kind of interesting. Like, they have a mathematician, David Hilbert, like really famous, like great mathematicians. That he, I guess I forgot which year exactly. He mentioned these 20 problems in a conference, saying that he lists a bunch of like meaningful like mathematical problems. One of them is saying that he believes that any mathematical system, once you make all the definitions, you can prove everything that is correct. So for example, you have a theorem, if this is correct, then I should be able to prove that. And more or less, I forgot is that more or less in the same conference, this fellow like Gödel like just came in and said, unfortunately it's not. I mean, gave out the proof that like you can find in whatever this kind of system, you always have something is true, but you are not able to prove it. And he was 22 at that time. And when he was in OH, like I think like he moved to the U.S. He believed the U.S. government is going to kill him and something. Then he reframed to eat. Then eventually like died of like starvation. So like it's a and John Nash, of course, is also partially insane. Like even in his early years, if you watch his movie, like he kind of not his movie, like the movie like talk about him that very early on, like he cannot distinguish like reality and like kind of I don't know. The other guy is partially insane is Tesla. Tesla, like from the very beginning, he's able to do like experiment just using his brain. Like he can vividly create experiments just using his brain. I don't know. Like maybe it's a legend. I don't know if it's true or false. But anyway, so but anyway, like okay, I kind of digress a little bit far, but for any game like that would be last equilibrium. Actually one of the last equilibrium here is actually the one we want to aim for is the generator is able to create data sample that's exactly identical. I shouldn't say identical, they're kind of indistinguishable to the training data. And because of that, like the discriminator essentially will just spell out output like 50-50%, 50-50 chance, basically like with 0.5 probability that's saying that okay, this is true or this is fake, but basically it cannot give anything meaningful. And of course, this is like will be most interesting to us because we are interested in generating or creating a perfect generator. So a little bit detail in the notation here. Typically, the model, what the generator have is like it will input with some noise, and use this noise. The generator itself is kind of a deterministic model, right? So it depends on this noise to generate a kind of random sample there. So this will be kind of random, and then with this you generate some samples. Go for this deterministic model, you generate some samples here. Will be kind of preferably like indistinguishable with the true data, and then this will be plugged in with this discriminator here. I will use this P for Px given C to describe this generator model, and this QX is correspond to the true model there, or like the true data there. And then we'll go through this discriminator. And then the discriminator trying to say whether it's coming from this QX or coming from this PX given Z there. And if it's coming from this QX, we should potentially, preferably, we'll spell out 1. Otherwise, if coming from here, we will spell out 0, something like that. As I mentioned, so therefore the model distribution will be like this, right? From the generator, the model distribution will be, it depends on the distribution of the noise you input in, and then you have this kind of the deterministic model that you actually train, and then the actual data model from your distribution will be like that. And then again, the true model will be use this QX here. Then we need to decide the cost function for the discriminator. The cost function will be simply trying to maximize the cost entropy, minimize the cost entropy loss for correct classification, right? So again, like dx should output 1 when it sees something is true, right? So therefore, the cost entropy loss should be log dx, like when x is sampled from p data here, and when it's sampled from the model here will be log 1 minus dx there, or like log 1 minus dx. I can also write as like 1 minus d g z here. I'm taking fh for z here. But note that like in terms of the discriminator, it doesn't know this way. So in terms of discriminator, it's actually seeing this here. And for the generator, like the cost function should be just exactly opposite as the discriminator, right? For the generator, it's just try to fool the discriminator as much as possible, so it will be just the exact opposite. But in terms of the generator, it doesn't have control of this guy here, right? Only this guy it can control. Therefore, the cost, I can ignore this terms here, so I only have this here, right? So this will be the cost function for the discriminator and the generator. So, okay, I guess I'll go through this and I will stop today. So now for the optimal discriminator, it's actually easy to derive. You can derive in closed form here. So using calculus of variation, so basically you have dx here. Wait a sec. I'm trying to again minimize this guy here, right? Minimize this J function here. Yeah, okay. And minimize this JD here, right? So, but be careful, like this is actually a functional function, right? This is actually a functional here. I'm trying to minimize over all the possible discriminator here. So the typical way is using this calculus of variation is like I have this function. If I vary this function a little bit by any function, a tiny little bit, the slope should still be 0. So if this is the case, this should be like the kind of the extremum there. It can be maximum or minimum, but at least it will be an extremum. So this is something we will aim for. So then let's go through that. So I have this arbitrary delta x here added with this lambda here, very tiny lambda. Lambda should approach 0. And then I take the derivative with respect to lambda. So then JD again like, is equal to this guy here, like expectation of log this guy, log D, and expectation of log 1 minus D when D is sampled from P data and sampled from P model here. And taking the derivative, I have like 1 over this term, right? and I have take a derivative like lambda delta x, I have like delta x coming back. So I have this term here. So I have expectation this guy over p data and expectation this guy over p model here. So then the expectation, I can write it as an integral, right? So I have p data x here. I copy this term. Now, lambda is very small. Let me just ignore this term here. So I just ignore these two terms here. I only have this left. Now what you see is I actually have this guy multiplied by delta x, taking derivative here, taking integral here is equal to 0. And delta x is any function, right? So any function multiplied by this guy, integral is equal to 0. The only possibility will be like this guy has to be equal to 0, right? So therefore, second this thing is equal to 0, then we'll get like the optimum d will be simply equal to this. So okay, I guess I'll just stop here. I will continue like on Thursday, like on GANs and maybe on autoencoder and or maybe like Boltzmann machine. Yeah. So.